everybody. So good afternoon, NoCal. We are in the home stretch of what has been an amazing virtual conference so far that Delia has so masterfully put together. So huge thanks to Delia, and also just want to give another shout out and thanks to our sponsors, Lexus, Thomson Reuters, and Continuing Education of the Bar. So I am pleased today to be introducing the next session, Teaching Modern Business Skills to Early Career Legal Professionals, a case study. Our speakers today will share how the nonprofit Institute for the Future of Law Practice developed its skills-based curriculum to teach practical business skills to law students and global legal professionals, including a first-person case study on the impact of iFlip, which is different from IFLIP that we know in AALL, from a recent alumna. As a housekeeping reminder, please do put questions into the chat as the program goes along, and then we'll have some time at the end for some Q&A. Now, I would like to introduce our two fabulous speakers for today. So joining us from Chicago is Kevin Colangelo. Kevin is the Executive Director at the Institute for the Future of Law Practice. He was a member of the founding leadership team at legal outsourcing pioneer Pangea 3, and has also held leadership roles at 3 Am Law 100 firms. Kevin has a JD cum laude from Vermont Law School, where he is a fellow at the Center for Legal Innovation. He's also a fellow of the College of Law Practice Management and an American Lawyer Legal Intelligence Fellow. Fun fact about Kevin, he played golf left-handed for 4 years before switching to right-handed at the urging of his high school golf coach, but he still carries a left-handed club in his bag in case of a golf emergency. And next, zooming in from Atlanta, is Stacy Dukes. Stacy is a 2L at Southern University Law Center with a BA in English and Media Communications and an MA in Professional Mental Health Counseling. Stacy serves as Vice President of the Black Law Students Association and is a Student Bar Association representative among a host of other professional volunteer roles. She is a 2020 Thurgood Marshall College Foundation Leadership Institute Fellow and SULC Top 5 Scholarship recipient for being in the top 5 of her law school class. The fun fact about Stacy, also on the sports vein, is that she is a marathon runner and has competed in international marathons as far away as Tokyo, but has never completed a marathon in her home city of Atlanta. I will say not yet. There's still time. So please give a warm virtual NoCal welcome to our speakers, and Kevin and Stacy, the virtual floor is now yours.
Thanks so much, Holly. Thank you for that kind introduction. It's very nice to see you again. Yeah, we are iFlip, and we're just going to clarify we're different than the AALL iFlip, but I think our missions, at least on the broader scheme, are fairly similar. We are a 7-year-old entity. Our roots go back 7 years, and as a nonprofit, we are a company that's completely focused on bringing critical business skills, critical what we call modern law practice skills, to legal professionals across the spectrum and across the globe, quite honestly. So I'm going to, the way our program is going to go is I'm going to give you a background on iFlip in the sense of how we got to where we are. And then the real crux of our presentation is going to be a little bit of a Q&A between Stacy and me regarding her experience with iFlip. And we're going to tie that all together for all of you in terms of how this can be important, not only to yourselves, but also to professionals that you work with on a daily basis. And we've got a lot of data to support that. I don't know that I'll get to all of that, but I'm happy to speak with any of you individually later on about some of that data and what it really means for the future of skills-based training for legal professionals. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to move this toolbar out of the way so I can move to a full slideshow. And I hope everyone can see that. If Stacy, why don't you help me? Can you see the full screen there?
Yes, Kevin, we can see it.
Oh, perfect. So as Holly said, this is a case study on teaching modern business skills to early career legal professionals. So the premise of our founding, which goes back, as I said, about almost 7 years now, founded by several law professors, some of whom you may know, Bill Henderson, Bill Moos, and Dan Linna, who are all known for being innovative kind of mavericks, if you will, law professors, really looked at the industry and said, look, the idea of the legal practice, irrespective of where you are, public practice, private practice, solo shop, all the way up to the biggest law firms and large companies, it's evolving, and it has been evolving from a one-to-one consultative to a one-to-many products and services. And in fact, when we were talking about preparing for this session, I could think of no better place to talk about this one-to-many products and services than in the library and the knowledge management space, as kind of keepers of information and gatekeepers to kind of solutions within your organizations. Well, the problem that we see is that there's this disjunction between what's being taught to legal professionals, very specifically in law school and graduate school, and what's actually going on in the workplace. So what our founders did, and what I got excited about when I was a volunteer for iFlip a few years ago, was the idea that there's a way to teach some very specific skill sets, teach them very efficiently, highly engineered training, teach them very quickly in some sense, as compared to like a law school class, and get these practical skills into the hands of young professionals. So in some ways, we're populating the newer professionals in legal, starting with law school, starting with kind of first and second year lawyers and allied professionals who are early on in their careers. Doesn't exclude professionals later in their careers, but in terms of the impact that we're trying to have, we started at that level, and that's a big part of our story. Is, hey, these skills are not being taught. People are sitting in lunch and learns and kind of webinars, but they're not actually getting the skills taught the way that higher education or institutions are teaching skills and validating those skills. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. Just a quick graphic on that, because I think it's important, probably something that you all know very, very well, is that legal as compared to medical, which a lot of people do compare the two professions of the two industries, it's kind of upside down in legal, where in medical, you have less than 10% of the people that are in the profession who have their advanced degree, their doctorate, their MD, et cetera. Whereas in the legal profession, it's actually about 12%, but we kind of round it up to 1 in 10 have, that only 10% don't have their JD. So law is opening up. And in fact, you have Scott Rechthofen talking next about the coming disruption of legal services. And I know Scott well, and I think I know a lot of what he's going to be talking about. And it's something that I think, particularly in the law library, from my experience over the last 2 decades, you know this better than anybody, in terms of there are so many different approaches, tools, technologies, et cetera, that are making it much easier for people who do not have JDs or are not, working as a lawyer, to do legal work. And so that's a big premise for what we landed on, which is this idea. You see the graphic on the right side, what a lot of people know as the T-shaped professional, the T-shaped lawyer. This is not a construct that iFlip created. This is something that's out there in business. But the idea is, the yellow part there, the vertical part, the legal knowledge and skills, at least as it relates to law students and those going into, say, paralegal or even in legal operations now, which is being taught at the university level. That's kind of what's being taught today, is legal knowledge and skills. You learn a lot about bankruptcy and real estate and trust in estates and things like that. But you don't know, for example, or you are not taught things like data analytics or really understanding how to read a balance sheet. If you've got a background in business and you come to law that way, you have an advantage. But if you don't have that, which is the majority of the 100,000 plus people that enter the profession in one way or the other every year, these are the types of knowledge, skills, and abilities that we looked at, and we talked to thousands of employers, particularly on the client side, on the corporate side, and they told us, these are the multidisciplinary skills that we'd love to have our new employees, our younger professionals, people who are joining us. We'd love to have them kind of hit the ground running. So that's where iFlip was created. And what we did for a number of years was run in-person boot camps going all the way back to 2014 and 15. And these were very successful boot camps. And Stacy herself went through one of those, and we're going to talk deeply about that. But when we hit the pandemic, we had to pivot, and it was a pivot that was planned for a long period of time because, as you may know, if you've tried to run in-person sessions or in-person training, all-day sessions, or even remote off-site or off-campus, number one, it can get very expensive. Number two, you're very limited in terms of the audience you can reach. But what we've all learned during the pandemic is we're all getting much more comfortable being remote, and thus we're able to reach more people online. So I became involved with iFlip about 18 months ago to help iFlip, kind of as a consultant at the time, to help iFlip pivot its training programs from in-person boot camps, which really could only serve about 50 to 60 people at a time. And we could only do that every, three, 4 times a year. So call it, roughly 200 people in a given year. Very expensive to do. We pivoted that to an online asynchronous certification model. We actually just released it a month ago today. Great response so far. I'm not here to pitch to you the idea of it, but I'm here to explain to you kind of what it is that we teach, why it's important, and then talk a little bit more in detail about how it's impacting young professionals. So these are the 6 courses. We've always taught these 6 courses. They are now available online. They are a 10-hour full curriculum that if somebody literally wanted to wake up at 8 a.m. and sit down and go through the process, and by the end of the day have earned their certification, the Modern Legal Practice certification, they can do that in the course of a single day. But because it's asynchronous, you can do it over the course of 5 years if you want. Our memberships are lifetime, and they're available on any platform. So people look at them when they're commuting. They look at them, in between doing other things. We've got people calling us or emailing us, excuse me, and saying, hey, is this available for my tablet? Because I like to sit in my recliner. I sit at my desk all day. I like to sit in my recliner and take these classes. So we made it something that kind of matches up with the way people consume information today, and in particular, the way people are learning today. And the rest of these slides here talk a little bit about that in terms of why we kind of listen to the market, not just in terms of the skills, but how people are learning. We didn't just decide to turn on a camera and have videos go on for 45 minutes where people get fatigued 15 minutes in. So we did a lot of surveys, we did a lot of beta testing, and we also listened to career educators in terms of what works and what doesn't work in the online environment. We want to, first and foremost, make sure the learning is happening. So we do create graduate level courses. And at the end of the day, or at the end of each course, excuse me, there's an exam. So unlike a traditional webinar, or unlike going to a conference, when you sit through one of our courses, you actually have to pass the exam, and you get 2 tries to do it. And you have to pass the exam before you can move on to the next course. So in order to earn our certification, you have to pass 6 exams, and only then will you be certified. We do that for the very reason that we want this to be an academic exercise that actually results in new skills. And so we've done that since the beginning of time. We used to do it in person. Now we're doing it online. And when we issue a certification, when we issue the badges that are available on LinkedIn, and we're accredited now with an organization called Accredible in terms of the rigor behind our skills training, those certifications mean something. And that's a big point that I want to stress as we talk a little bit more about why we're doing this, and why kind of business skills are so important to early career professionals. Real quickly, that's just a list of our supporters to date. We have a mix. As a nonprofit, we rely on donations, and we have a mix of large law firms and large companies, a lot of ALSPs, a lot of, kind of disruptors, if you want to think about it that way, or innovators. And then we have a lot of law schools that work with us, and not just in the US, but in Canada and the UK, and even in Australia and Asia, that work with us. The only limitation is that we're only teaching in English. Other than that, we've got students and people interested in our program from around the world. So all of this is to say that, the skills themselves have been validated as important, as multidisciplinary learning, that when a young professional steps into her or his role, be it at a law firm or at a company, opening up her own shop, or perhaps going into the public sector, there's some things that they know. They're not experts, they're not black belts, but there's some things that they know that can help them communicate with others. One of the examples we always give is one of our students who was working, did a joint internship between Baker McKenzie and Cummins. And in both instances, the feedback that we got directly was, wow, you know, she stepped right in and could talk to the people from marketing, could talk to the people from IT, and even some of the HR people about how to manage discrete projects. That's because she learned project management and data analytics from us. So that's a big part of kind of our value proposition and why we do this, and why we actually think that this is the kind of thing that well, first of all, it's needed now. The timing is right. The technology is there for us, and we can do it incredibly cheaply. We'd love to do it for free, and we try to provide it for free to law students very specifically, but very, very cheap, not thousands of dollars, you know, barely even a couple of $100 for 10 hours of content. This is our board of directors, and you can see, you may know some of these folks. These are people from across the profession, including current professors and deans, as well as a current student. One of Stacy's classmates is our latest member of the board of the directors to join us last month. So let's move over to the case study, which is specifically about Stacy and her experience with iFlip. As I've said a few times now, what we're doing is teaching modern business skills. And the initial premise brought forth by our founders and then the initial volunteers really was exactly as we've talked about. People need to be able to step into their professional environment with more than just understanding the bankruptcy code or knowing what, you know, real estate transactions look like. Sounds very simple. It's pretty amazing that it's not really taught in a rigorous way. So that's how we were born. And it all started with the boot camps. And we reached out back in the day, reached out to first law schools about their interest in this, and then turned right back around and went to the marketplace seeking donations. And it worked on all fronts. The law schools were absolutely happy to participate, absolutely happy to put this in front of their students and say, hey, you know, you can apply for this. Back in the day, it was an application. You can apply for this. And then the way we structured the program was that anybody who went through the program, with the exception of the pandemic one that Stacy took, everyone who went through the program was guaranteed an internship. So it really worked out very well. But at all times, we were laser focused as an organization on collecting data from our students, data from the employers, data from the schools themselves in terms of what they were seeing. Because the most important thing that we've learned over the years, and that I think I'm speaking for myself, that I've learned over the years in the legal profession is we cannot rest on thinking we figured everything out. We cannot rest on thinking we're the smartest people in the room, or that because it's working, it's obviously everything that they need to know. So we are data maniacs at iFlip. And what it allows us to do is speak with a lot of clarity about the impact of being an iFlip student. So when Holly and Delia and I, or Holly and Delia reached out to me and said, hey, you know, would you be interested in doing this session? I immediately said, yes, I need to do a case study. I need somebody that I know is available that can actually go through her experience with iFlip in terms of their perspective, because I'm the executive director. Of course, I'm going to sit here and promote it and give you every last detail about why we're so valuable. But at the end of the day, we are nothing without our students. And if the students do not find our teaching impactful, then we're just going to fold up shop. I mean, that's just how it works. So listening to our students, constantly engaging with our students, and empowering our students. You saw one of the members of the board of directors. You heard a little bit about Stacy's background. She's done most of that on her own. But I think iFlip is becoming a real big, important part of people's story as they're coming out of law school, very specifically, in terms of how they market themselves, how they perform, and just essentially overall improving their professional identity. So with that, I'm gonna just start asking Stacy some questions about herself and about her her own journey within legal, and I'll stop sharing my screen so you guys can see our lovely faces. So I'm in a little box right there, but I can see Stacy. So Stacy, why don't you just start by giving everyone a little bit of your overview on entering school, because you're not coming right to law school after undergrad. You have and had a career before going to law school.
Yes. First of all, thank you all for having me. I'm honored to be here to speak with you all. And law librarians definitely have a special place in my heart because I heavily rely on my law librarians at school and definitely credit them to a lot of why I've been able to do as well as I have in school. So thank you. Thank you for what you do and being so patient with us. But my journey, as Kevin indicated, was a little different. I worked as I was a licensed professional counselor. So I was mental health therapist, working with a variety of different populations throughout my career, children, adults, families. And law school was always a goal in undergrad, but I did not, coming out of undergrad, I knew I wasn't ready for the rigor of law school. I wasn't mature enough. And I kind of took a different path, took some time off, ended up going to obtain a master's degree in counseling because I had started working in the mental health field. And my passion for the law and just that desire never went away. So I finally just decided to shut everything down, go to law school. And I did that. And coming into law school, I had some exposure, but my exposure to the legal field was somewhat limited. My career allowed me to have, as a therapist, I did work with individuals involved in the criminal justice system, as well as families and children involved with the Department of Family and Children Services. So I had some interaction with family law as well as criminal law, but that was pretty much my scope as it related to the law. So I'm a first generation law student, and just excited about what I've been able to learn and do, and excited about this career.
So Stacy, let's talk about that going forward. So it's the night before entering law school. What's your plan?
My plan, I came into law school honestly being open. Like I said, I had limited exposure. I knew that. I knew there was more to it. I didn't have much of an idea what that looked like coming into law school, but my comfort zone was obviously criminal law and family law. So that was always sort of a fallback. But as I began to get into law school and take classes and just join different organizations on campus, I began to learn about the vast opportunities that were possible with the law degree that I had no exposure to and knew nothing about. And some of which I would, if you'd asked me before coming into law school, I probably would have said I was not interested in. And again, that's just lack of exposure and not really knowing what it looked like.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's one of the things for anyone here who's either gone to law school or worked at a law school or had to empathize with people who did either of those. I think that's a typical situation, and I think one of the challenges that we faced at iFlip is trying to find people like Stacy and connect with them and say, look, we're not just another company here trying to sell you something, trying to get $50 out of your pocket. We're actually here to expand your horizons. A lot of the challenges that we face with trying to bring modern business skills to early career professionals, very specifically to law students, is just the idea that, well, a lot of students will just react and say, well, why isn't the school, whatever the school's doing for me is good enough. It's not to trash law schools, and in fact, law schools are some of our greatest partners. But they're providing, as we know, if you've worked in a law firm, they're providing a very specific set of services. And for them to be able to pivot and say, okay, now we're going to teach hardcore data analysis, it's a slow boat to turn. So on that point, Stacy, iFlip came to your campus a number of years ago. They've got Southern has a very progressive administration led by a very, very progressive chancellor named John Pierre, who literally, as I got into the academic world from the private sector, I don't think I've spoken to anybody who does not know Chancellor Pierre, because he's out there advocating for his students at all times. Southern is a law school that's based in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. It's a relatively small school. It's one of the 6 law schools within the HBCUs, the historically Black colleges and universities. Typically, their students go on to practice in Louisiana or in somewhere nearby in the South, Florida, et cetera. The mindset of someone going to Southern is, and the way Southern was set up, typically or generally, was more focused on kind of local and regional. And as Stacy said, you know, what's kind of the hot topic within this area or within our communities. But iFlip comes on campus, and Stacy, you're a part-time student, so when did you learn about iFlip, and what was attractive to you? That's kind of the starting point of the case study is what got you interested in iFlip?
So like you said, Chancellor Pierre is very, very forward thinking. He's the reason that I ended up at Southern. I had no connection to the state of Louisiana. And just in considering law schools and speaking with him versus speaking with other schools, and I applied and was accepted to 6 different law schools, and I visited a lot of different law schools throughout my journey and considering where I was going to go. But there was something uniquely different about him and his vision. And Southern was the last school on my list, primarily because of geographic location. But I could not say no after speaking with Chancellor Pierre and understanding his vision and the things that he was making happen for students at Southern University. And so when first he introduced iFlip to us as students, and he talked to us about it. But also I had the benefit of colleagues because, as you've said, iFlip has been around on Southern's campus for a few years. So I had the benefit of colleagues, other students that had gone through the iFlip process. And I was able to speak with them and just see what they were able to accomplish after having participated in the boot camps and being placed in different opportunities. And the year that I interviewed for iFlip, the Trezell, who's now on the board, who Kevin mentioned earlier, had just completed a 7-month opportunity with Cummings in their in-house legal department. And it was an amazing opportunity, phenomenal opportunity for her. And it allowed her to do a lot of things and accomplish a lot of things. And so just speaking with other students and just understanding that the benefit of the skills that iFlip was teaching would help me to be more competitive coming out of law school and more marketable, which is important to me because this is a second career for me. So I have to do everything I need to do to make it count because, you know, this is a second career. So just learning about what iFlip offer and seeing like the true like testimonies of people who have been through the program and the opportunities that they were going on to get, but also what they learned. And you could just tell by even Trezell and speaking of her experience and the things that she knew, they were very different from, like Kevin said earlier, what we learn in law school. Like these aren't things you can learn in the classroom, in a law school classroom. So that was attractive to me.
So let's dig deeper on that, because I think it's important to really focus in on connecting what skills that employers have told us, and then we've decided to teach what the skills are, and then how you've been able to leverage those. And knowing that your experience is a little different than some of the folks who went through our programs before, because you went through the pandemic edition of iFlip, which was our first online attempt, which was live online, much like we're doing here today, whereas our new structure is fully asynchronous. But you know, in terms of the coursework, project management, leadership, data analytics, learning about different legal technologies, learning about business and finance and service design. Let's talk a little bit about how you leverage that, and maybe you can feel free to say, well, you know, I leveraged these 3, but this one turned out to not be so important, at least so far, because I think it's important to connect for everyone the idea that we're trying to give every student, whether or not you're in law school or you're a 3rd or 4th year lawyer, you're an allied professional, et cetera, we're trying to give them something that they can use, as our founder says, the very next day. We don't always get that right. So Stacy, why don't you talk a little bit about, you know, kind of that experience and the skills very specifically that you think have been helping you?
Okay. So first of all, I'll just say that iFlip for me was an introduction to all of the opportunities and possibilities that earning a law degree could bring outside of the traditional legal practice. So to then be introduced to things like legal tech, legal operations, artificial intelligence, I came into this thing, I didn't know you could use legal and tech in the same sentence. Like, so I'm at ground zero when I came into this, experience. So it was all new to me. And it was an introduction to not only that the possibility of all these things, but also the necessity of being on trend with where the profession was headed. That was very eye-opening for me as a boot camp student, not having no idea that this was a thing. It also informed me about what goes on in the business of law, what skills employers are looking for, knowing, particularly in the firm environment, knowing what the resources are, when and how to leverage those resources, and the fact that these are skills that not only the firms value, but that clients value, and that clients are looking for firms to have competent attorneys, knowing business, having business skills. So first of all, I just want to say, when I came into this, I knew nothing about any of these things. I don't have a business background. My undergraduate major was English. So with the iFlip experience and the boot camps and the different sessions, and it was a very interactive, even though we were the first pandemic class and we weren't able to travel and be in person, it was still very engaging and very interactive. There were students from across the country and even outside of the country, and we worked on teams. And so my team, I think there were about 5 of us, only 2 of us were actually in the US. And so that was a very unique and exciting experience, and was still connected with those students that are in Canada and other places. The projects, we did project-based learning. And so we use real world business issues to problem solve. And in doing so, we also had the opportunity to have coaching from industry leaders. And I think they refer to them as sharks, because ultimately from beginning to end of the program, we were working towards like a pitch and a presentation to these sharks who were general counsels of major corporations. 2 of my coaches that I still have a connection with now, and that it also provided networking opportunities for us to connect with these professionals. One is the general counsel at a major airline. I'm a former flight attendant, so that was big for me. And so we had sort of a connection there, and then we kept in touch. And then the other coach was a general counsel at Microsoft. And so we're still in touch, and he's actually helped me on projects beyond that in classes, even as recent as this semester. And so we learned about specific skills. We were introduced to, of course, basic business fundamentals, professional communication, leadership, accounting and finance, learning about the importance of stakeholders across firms and across organizations, and how important it is to build relationships and also understand the interests of various stakeholders across organizations, and how that plays out with processes, decision-making, and really the operation of the organization. We were introduced to various theories of process improvement, project management. We learned about legal tech using different platforms, introduced to different platforms of legal tech. We also, like I said, we were able to use the skills that we were learning simultaneously while we were working on this problem. And so we would then come out of our sessions, our learning sessions, and get together as our group, and then come back and present. We did several presentations throughout, and then ultimately we were pitching our proposal of how we would solve this particular problem. And I don't know if it's the same now, Kevin, but for us, we were working towards automating the NDA process. So we went from the initiation of the NDA all the way to execution, and we were talking to stakeholders within this particular fictional company, and then we were automating that process based on what the various the needs of different departments were, and the bottom line of the leadership and what their goals were.
Yeah, and I think that what we do with the current iteration of iFlip is we do a case study, and it's the same case study that you all worked with in the boot camps, and it runs throughout each 6 of our classes. So what we end up doing, and I think this is important for this group, is we really focus in on that kind of multifunctional, multidisciplinary, collaborative environment that I think a lot of, and very specifically, a lot of young professionals and those lawyers who come out of school and kind of get in the seat and are overwhelmed with all of the work that they have to do, and then all of these skills that are completely fresh to them, that the idea that they have to understand what electronic discovery is, to understand who to go to in the firm for something like knowledge management. I think that's a different paradigm in the current generation of learning in the legal profession than it was certainly for me, which is now almost 30 years ago, where we kind of knew, okay, well, if I need information, if I need to have somebody help me define and articulate a problem and then help me find the resources that can help me, develop solutions, I know the people to go to. I know exactly that path. I may not have those skills, but it was a different world back then. And, the technology was a lot different. The way we all processed and kind of traded on information was wildly different. So today, a lot of what we really focus on, and I think you heard it in Stacy's comments, was the idea of being part of a multidisciplinary team, and in some ways, knowing a little bit of the language. I wouldn't say what we do is making experts. If you want to think of it in terms of things like black belt, green belt, things like that, our training is equivalent to yellow belt or white belt, if you want to kind of make that direct comparison. One of our instructors of our online certification, who is a law school professor at the University of Richmond, actually says to his students, hey, to his actual students at Richmond, hey, you're going to take these courses, but let's just be clear that the course you take, he teaches service design. The course that I teach is kind of like a pre-read for what then I'm going to teach you in person. We're giving what I like to call walking, talking knowledge, understanding. If you're familiar, you probably are familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. It's kind of the first two pieces of Bloom's taxonomy, where we're not creating experts. We're not trying to send people out there trying to come into your offices and say, okay, we know exactly how to do this. But it makes it much easier for people to work together and for people to kind of take a step back and say, oh, this is this kind of a problem, or this requires this type of a technology. Oh, or the client wants me to look at the EBITDA on the balance sheet. Well, I actually know what that means. And maybe I now know that I need to go to this particular person in our financial department. There's a lot of what we do that's just building that connective tissue. And as you heard from Stacy, and for anyone who is currently connected to the academic world, specifically law schools or graduate schools, you know that it's just not there. It's just not part of the experience. And so what we really try to focus on is saying, okay, let's get this experience there. And then, as you heard from Stacy, let's try to connect that all together into some real world examples, some applied learning, and then our community, which includes employers from all over the world, law firms, as I said, companies, et cetera. They look at these students and say, you know what, I've got to choose from how many candidates for this particular internship or this particular entry level job. Well, here's 25 candidates and 3 of them have the iFlip certification. That tells me something. That tells me that they might be able to talk the language a little more quickly than someone else who comes and sits in the seat and then next summer takes the mini MBA program. So I hope that's really been helpful. I see that we've got about 5 minutes left. I wanted to take a pause. I don't know that I can see any questions, but I wanted to take a pause before we kind of wrap up our portion of this. Holly, do we ask for questions or we just look in the chat?
We can ask. I don't see any there. I actually have one, which is, I know you talked about the topics you're covering now, and I think many, if not all of the people attending today's session can kind of relate from the law library side, where, when we see, especially the law firm side, when I was there, when you see new associates start, you can tell which ones have had like the advanced legal research class, for example, right? So kind of an analogous situation where you can tell they've made that extra step and can sort of walk the walk and talk the talk and understand things. But I wondered if you're looking at expanding to other topics or areas, or whether you want to kind of stay where you are and what kind of the future plans are.
Thank you. Yeah, we are always looking to expand. In fact, over the last kind of 2 or 3 weeks, I've done 2 polls, not very well received, meaning in terms of votes. I was a little disappointed, but a Twitter poll and a LinkedIn poll that's still ongoing on our LinkedIn company page, asking people what would be the topics that they want to see next. Sneak peek is pricing legal work is the one that's taking the lead. That's in the LinkedIn poll. The poll that we did on Twitter was a little bit more towards something that we're focused on in terms of, how do we kind of look at our community, and how do we look at the demographics of our students and kind of emphasize certain ideals. And so the Twitter poll really leaned in heavily on diversity, equity, and inclusion. So basically teaching this concept of, what does it mean to foster and be part of an authentic or a very, equitable workplace situation, which is, again, if you look at the skills that we teach today and you look at something like that, or even look at, the other one, pricing legal work, those are very specific business skills. So our community is starting to tell us, hey, what it means, we use this term called professional identity, and what it means to develop my professional identity. It's really cool that I got the bankruptcy training and, and trust and estates and all that. And it's really cool what you guys are doing with these practical skills. But there's a whole other piece of being a professional, wherever you sit, that we really would like to have some guidance. We really like to even maybe create our own community around that. So we have that. We actually have, we're partnership with one of the big legal tech companies, who is doing a whole understanding voting rights seminar, and wants to teach that through us, because teaching that to people with a legal mindset or legal training could be more impactful, could be more, a kind of a higher level of learning. We are always looking to expand our topics. And what the great thing is with our current setup is, once you become an iFlip member, doesn't matter if you're, in an undergrad, you're pre-law, you're in legal operations, you're a law librarian, you're a partner at a major firm, although I don't see that happening anytime soon. But once you become a member, you're a member for life. And there's a couple of organizations that do things like this. I used to work at Bloomberg, so I'm very familiar with their ethos of, once you join us, all the content we add in the future is free. We're not going to add on like another $50 here or another $75 there. As we expand as a community, we're going to add a lot more content. We've got what we call a master series, which I hadn't planned to talk about today, but we've got this master series that we're developing with some folks, a couple people that Stacy mentioned that were Shark Tank judges, kind of giving us their applied learning. So we've got a GC and a CFO kind of doing a debate. We've given them a fact pattern, and they're going to do a debate. That one will be live, and we'll be able to take questions. But we're going to be doing a lot of different things, and it's all in response to our community. And one last piece on that, Holly. And this is one of the main reasons that we are a nonprofit. A lot of people look at us and say, hey, we'd love to, the big wigs out in Silicon Valley, hey, we'd like to throw a couple million in your pocket. And we said, that's great, but why don't you just donate it? And that keeps us a little more free from the pressures of having, shareholders. And so our shareholders are our community. So we poll the members constantly. They don't like it because we're constantly polling them, but we at least get representative samples of, did this, for example, the exams, did this, I see that, 20% of the people that took this exam missed this specific question. What was it about that question? Should we tweak it? Should we eliminate it? So we're constantly looking to improve. So we're open to really any topic. It's just a matter of kind of, figuring out how to produce it, and then figuring out how to put it in front of our community.
Great, thank you. Well, I think this is fascinating. It's really interesting. You've kind of come up in a very interesting time too. I think maybe a very opportune time to be able to put this information out there. And so I appreciate both Kevin and Stacy sharing their experiences with us. I'm sure we do have a question. I got one. So for those of us who teach legal tech, what can we do to promote iFlip?
Great question, Eli. Thank you for the question. I probably could talk to you separately about that. I mean, it really depends on where you are, like what your organization looks like. You know, I'd love to just have social media promotion. I talk about that all the time as the most free and easy way to promote our message. I'm actually just finishing, I'll probably finish it next week, our legal tech course, which is taught by Monica Goyal. If anybody knows Monica, she's a veteran of legal technology, one of the, I think, 10 leading women in legal tech, several years running. And she's just finishing her courses. And so that may be something where we could connect with you and give you a sneak peek of what she's taught. And maybe in that way, we could figure out a way for you to help us get our message out. So happy to talk to you separately about that.
And then I actually had one other question. I know you said there are badges for people on LinkedIn who've gotten the certification. Do you also have badges or things for like law firms or companies that have contracted with you to use you within their organizations, or?
Right. So we're just starting that. I'm a one-man show over here. Well, I'm the only paid employee. So we're just starting that. And I actually am looking to my left because I have the paperwork from our accreditation agency over here. Yeah, the stuff that we're doing with law firms is really interesting. It's beyond really what we can talk about today. But what a lot of the law firms are coming to us to talk about is very specific to that topic I mentioned earlier, was diversity, equity, and inclusion, where they'll say to us, hey, we would love to be able to gift 50 iFlip memberships to traditionally disadvantaged students, and at the same time have our own lawyers and maybe even clients go through the program. And so we're kind of developing what that looks like. Right now, we call it a participating employer program. So we don't have a badge yet. That's that thing on my left over there. But we're working on that. Somewhat like the Mansfield rule. I was involved in that in the early days. I was actually in the room when it was created, but not quite at that level. But certainly something where a firm can say, yes, we support these skills. Yes, we acknowledge that they're important to young professionals, and yes, we've kind of taken the weight of our organization, our gravitas, our money, I guess, in that sense, and put it toward the communities that are benefiting the most, what our data shows, which is historically disadvantaged students.
Yeah, the Mansfield rule was exactly what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
And, of course, it took time for that to sort of have its trajectory and move forward, but I think it's kind of a similar situation. So.
And I'm actually in touch with that group, with Diversity Lab, in that very topic, in terms of whether or not we can get one of their senior people to teach that course for us.
Great, awesome. Well, I don't see any other questions. I'm sure there are lots more, and I encourage people who attended to reach out, connect with one or both of you to, talk about how this can be helpful in your organizations or how you may want to get involved or learn more about it. I think it's really a great organization and opportunity for people. So thank you to Kevin and to Stacy for joining us today.
Thank you all very much appreciated.